So we're in Illustrator now. Oops, wrong tool. And so I know some of you have less experience than others with Illustrator, but this should be a pretty simple set of tools to use here. So you're going to set up your image, your illustrated image, rather than I'm just using the renders here in this way. So we're going to be labeling certain things. We're going to add a label for each of the views. The one thing I don't have here is a label for gorilla and chimpanzee both, so we'll add that. And then a simple 1 centimeter bar. So these things are going to come in at 150%, but do the 1 centimeter that matches 1 centimeter in that 150% world. So that will actually be 1.5 centimeters. And all of that stuff should fit on here on 11 by 17. Okay, so let's just start this from the beginning. If we want to create a new file in Illustrator, we can just go to File, New. And instead of letter, we'll use tabloid. So tabloid is 11 by 17. And we just want to make sure the orientation is set to landscape mode here. And the color mode, we haven't talked about color modes much yet. It doesn't really matter at this point. And we can leave the resolution at 300 ppi, pixels per inch. So in Illustrator, you'll have, this is your artboard. You can actually put artwork anywhere here. There's no restriction, but this is sort of printable space that you want to bring in, where you want to place your images. So just as a reminder, when you want to place an image in Illustrator, so let's say you scan your drawings, you can go to File and Place, and we can navigate to those. Sorry, just a sec. My mouse is getting stuck here. So let's say I take this one. Now remember, when you place an image, you want to make sure link is not enabled here. We want to embed it rather than link it. And then we can just click in here and it will bring that image in. And then this can be placed wherever you want. So we want to separate things based on layers. So in Illustrator, remember, we've got our layers palette here. And so for the separate images, it's probably worthwhile to put them on their own layers. So you can just click on the new layer button at the bottom here and then place another image. So I'm going to File, Place, a different one. Oh, I brought in the same one. And we can organize them on the page here. So let me just jump back into this one here. And so you can see that I've got all of these images placed on the page. And when you do your scanning in Photoshop, after you scan them, you may want to crop them. You can see that mine are cropped to a smaller level here. We talked about doing that earlier. And let me just open up an image in Photoshop and I can show you that. So if you have an image like this that you've scanned in and you want to crop it to a smaller size to get rid of all of the outer part, we can use in Photoshop the cropping tool and just click and drag around that, hit return, and then you'll have a smaller version. So as long as it's enough to include all of this, then you can save this out as a different file, different name, and then bring that into Illustrator. So one of the things we want to do in Illustrator is to align things. So we've organized things here by having everything on a separate layer, and I should really name these things. If I wanted to name this, I can just double click on this, and I could call it Gore Ant, or Gorilla Anterior. But I want to make sure these things are aligned properly. So there are alignment tools in Illustrator, but it's probably better just to use rulers that are here, because alignment tools will go to the edge of the document. So if you've cropped this one to this level, and this one you've cropped a little bigger, alignment tools will take that space into account. So what you can do instead are use rulers here. So you can see at the top of my page, there's a ruler at the top with these numbers. You can actually click in there and drag out a guide. And so you can set up guides, and I'll just clear my guides here. So if you want to align things horizontally, you can drag a guide from the top ruler bar. Let's say, put it something like this. And then I can use that as a guide to move these around using the black arrow and try and line them up to the guides. And you can use the arrows on your keyboard too to move things around. So you just want to try and make sure everything is aligned as much as possible. So you can see all of these are hitting the top here. And then the alignment in the vertical, I was suggesting to align to the center so you can have an easy comparison between them. So this you'll have to eyeball a little bit. You can put a mark here that gives you an idea of where the center is. And you can make as many of these guides as possible, and even these you can put on their own layer. Right now I'm putting them on this layer, but you can create a separate layer for guides. And if you want to hide the guides, you just go under View, and down here to Guides you can hide them, and Apple or Command colon or semicolon is the shortcut for that. Okay. So I just want you to arrange your illustrations in this way. Now, for this one, you can actually do your Illustrator tracing right in this file. If you've done it in another file, you can just copy and paste those Illustrator labels. So if I had a new file open here, and I open my tools, so if I have a path that I drew earlier to illustrate something, you can just grab them, copy, and paste them into the other file. You may have to scale them, but so you can do it that way, or you can just work in this file. So the other thing we want to do is to add labels to things. So there are a number of things that I list in the assignment that I want you to label here. Let me just see where it is. Yep. So you can just look this stuff up. So the tuberosity, the posterior articular surface, the anterior articular surface, and the middle articular surface. And if you can't find this for chimp and gorilla, you can find something similar for human. It should be the same. And I'm not really worried about your knowledge of anatomy, although I want you to look it up and try and get it right. It's more about just having something to label here. So if we want to create some labels, then I would put these on their own layer. So we can create a new layer. And so let's just get rid of this. going to lock all the other layers. So once I have everything placed as I wanted, I can just click on the locks in the Illustrator Layers palette. Then I can select these things more easily. So I want to draw a leader line like this. So you can, if we just go in a little bit close here, you can see it's a black leader line with a small white drop shadow. And this adds a little bit of differentiation between the figure and the content here. And so to do that, we'll just use the same tool that we used before, the pen tool. We saw in our practice before when we were drawing things, if you click and drag, you can make these curvy lines. But for this, we just want to make simple straight lines with a nice corner. So if we just click once, now if I hold down Shift, it's going to lock it into a 45-degree angle increment, so I can get it in the perfect horizontal here. And then I can go down here and do the same thing, hold down Shift and click again. And to get out of this tool, to stop it, I can just click on the black arrow. And so the last thing we want to do for this is just to add a small feature at the end of the leader line. So you could end it like this, but typically I'll put a small circle on the end. So to do this, we have to open up the stroke palette. And in the stroke palette, when we have this line selected, we can change its weight. So if we turn up the weight, you can see it gets thicker. And we can go down lower. So I was suggesting a 1-point stroke, but it's going to depend on your image. But probably 1 point would be the most. You can try to go down to lower 0.75 or 0.5 if that's suitable. But for now, I'm just going to leave this at 1 point. And then you can add arrowheads here. So the end one, so you can do it at the beginning and the end of the line. I'm just going to click on here and choose the circular arrowhead. Number 21. And so you can see it's quite big, and this is what this value does here. You can turn down the size of the arrowhead. So just make it so it looks, so it's visible but not overwhelming. And the last thing we're going to do is to add a drop shadow to this. And we do that not in the stroke menu, but under the effects menu, under stylize. And we can add a drop shadow, and it will open up an option box for us. And there are a couple of things that you have to change here. Mine's set to something different because I was working on it the other day, but yours will come up as multiply at 75% and some other values here, and the color will be black. So we want to change this color to white here. Change the opacity to 100%. And then change the mode to normal. We can click on preview to see what it's going to look like, and you can see a small little drop shadow is here, and we can just change the X and Y offset to move it over a little bit, so -1 in this case, and maybe move it down here. If that's too much, then you can change this to a float value of like 0.5 and -0.5. So all we're trying to do is just to set up a very small offset color to pick it up off the underlying image. If you want to go back and change that again, if you select this object under the window for the appearance palette, the appearance palette will show any effect that you put on this object. So you can change the stroke and color here, but you can click on drop shadow to get this back up. Give it a blur of 0. Okay. Then the last thing we want to do here is just to add the label. So to add label, we can just use the text tool and type Mark. And this is a sans serif font. And to change the font, we can open up the character palette, which is under type and character, or Command T, and we can choose a font. Now in this case I'm using Helvetica, and we can set this is set to a 12-point font, and so whatever suits the size of your image. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger. And the rule of thumb I use for placing font with leader lines is that if the leader line is emerging from the right, then it should be lined up with the lower right of the text. If it's reversed, I think I have a reversed one here, then you want just to line it up with the lower left of the text. So you don't want to put it here or put it here. Just be consistent in lining up with the lower quadrant corner of your text, like this. And so if you're labeling the same thing more than once, I'd like you to have multiple labels for it, but I want them to be aligned as much as you can. So on these two images, I'm labeling the same articular facet, and it's good practice to try and line up where they label the object. Now these are offset from each other, but try and keep it close. And if you can line up like where the text starts, then that's a good thing to do too. It just makes comparison easier. It's a typographic hierarchy. People know exactly that these two labels are labeling the same thing. And the other thing you have to add are the different view names at the bottom, so dorsal, medial, and anterior. And the one thing I don't have here, which is the name of the species. So this is gorilla, and it should be italicized, capitalized. The first word, and the species name is lowercase, and we want this to be italic. Okay, you can make it italic here. I'm just not seeing the option. Label that, and the chimp is pan troglodytes, so we can also label that. So pan troglodytes, and we want to align that text as well. So this will all be on the artboard, so I might have to move everything over. So you can select everything in an image. If you just unlock it all, grab everything, and you can shift things over if you need to fit. So you'll have to work on making everything fit and align in this way. Let me just double check here to see if there's anything else. Yeah, so for a scale bar, you can just build it in the same way you build the leader lines. You can see I did the same thing down here. I just measured this and gave it a stroke. That's a little bit thicker, and just added a label above it. Now you can bring in when you bring in your images that you've traced, they all have the scale bar in here, so each one of these squares is 1 centimeter. So you might want to make a note of this in your tracing, so you can use that as a guide for making your 1 centimeter mark. That's stuff you can figure out. Okay, I know a lot of boring stuff to sit and watch, but when you come to do this, you can refer to this video and set your images up in the same way. So when you're done with them in Illustrator, when everything is perfect, then you can save this out, save as, and just like everything else, I want you to save it last name, first name, assignment 2 layout, and then you're going to submit that to me. Okay. So you know all the steps, you just have to make it happen, and the only way you're going to learn and remember the stuff is just by doing it. So for the remainder of the class, we've got about an hour and a bit. If you want to work on stippling practice, you can do that here. If you want to work on doing your illustrator tracing, you can do that. If you want to work on actually stippling and tracing your actual specimens, then you can do that too, and I'll just be here to help out. Okay, thanks.